Okay, yeah, that was a short video, services we offer and who we are. Today, like I mentioned earlier, we will be looking at study route to Canada. I will just be prompting us on some things that I think are important for us to consider. Again, my name is Wisdom Akpokige. I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, and I am the principal consultant with Dow Immigration Consulting Services. I'm duly registered with the ICCRC, which is Immigration Consultants of Canada Regulatory Council. They are the body that regulate immigration consultants here in Canada. I'm also registered with CAPIC, which is Canadian Association of Professional Immigration Consultants. So today we will be looking at study routes to Canada. I thought it was good for us to start with some basic knowledge about Canada. I know many of us here know this, but I'm just going to use a few seconds to run through this. So Canada has a total population of approximately 37.74 million as of 2020, and our capital city is Ottawa, whereas our biggest city is Toronto. So many of you already know Toronto. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories. We would look at all of them in a minute. And we have a total land area of 9,984,670 square kilometers. We are the second largest country in the world. I know most of you here know that the largest country in the world is Russia, and Canada is the second. Our life expectancy here is 83 years for both sexes. So people live long in Canada. Our national day is 1st of July. I know many of you already know these information, but please just bear with me because I'll be referring to these. So I'd like to just run through them. I would say we have 10 territories. So the provinces you can see my mouse would be from far west to be British Columbia with capital in Victoria, and Alberta, capital Edmonton, Saskatchewan, capital Regina, Manitoba, capital is Winnipeg. Ontario, the capital is Toronto, and Quebec, the capital is Quebec City. And we have New Brunswick, the capital is Fredericton. Prince Edward Island, the capital is Charlottetown. And yay, Nova Scotia, the capital is Halifax, and I live in Halifax. So I'm reaching you from Halifax today. The last but not the least province would be Newfoundland. Newfoundland has its capital as St. John's. And then we have 3 territories. The territories are the north of Canada. They are the coldest regions in Canada. We have Yukon from the far west, and the capital is Whitehorse. We have Northwest Territory. The capital is Yellowknife. And then we have Nunavut, and the capital is Iqaluit. So these are really cold regions. Anyway, I don't want to bother you too much with the geography here in Canada. So let's dip quickly into what we have today. Education in Canada. So we do have free education for children below 18 years of age. So that means if you're coming to Canada to study and you have children that are 18 years or younger, you can come with them and they would have free education up until they get into the university. Now we have high quality education for citizens, permanent residents, and for foreign nationals. So whoever is coming to Canada to study, you would have high quality education. I'm sure you would agree with me that Canadian schools are rated high in the world. And that's also because the government spends more per capita on education than any other country in the world. So Canada really invests in education. I'd like to run us through a step-by-step guide if you want to apply to any school and if you want to come to study in Canada. So again, this is just a guide. It doesn't mean that this is the only thing you need to know. It's not exhaustive, but I thought this would give you a good guide if you want to come study here in Canada. So the first step is to understand the requirements. Now, the fact that you want to come and study in Canada, you should know that one, you require admission, right? So you need to look at the schools, what are their requirements, in terms of admission. Remember, you would also need to pay tuition. You would also need to take care of yourself, which we call room and board here in North America. So you want to feed yourself, accommodation. So what are those things that would be required of you? Of course, you need to provide, you need to save up some money to embark on this adventure. So you need to understand the requirements. The next thing is to choose your course and your institution. Now, this is very, very important because I've had many people approach me and they say, is either they were denied their study permit or they didn't know the course that they wanted to study and all of that. Okay, so I was saying it is very important for you to choose your course and the institution. So one big thing with the institution, in Canada, we have what we call the designated learning institution. So you want to be sure that the school that you're applying to, it's a designated learning institution, because if you don't go to a designated learning institution, when you finish your study, certain privileges that you are supposed to have, you will not have those privileges because the institution is not a designated learning institution. And we'll get to that in a bit. Now, choosing your course. Sometimes when you apply for your study permit, the visa officer looks at your application and see the course that you have applied to study, and then they try to look at the logic behind your application. I mean, someone that did engineering is now coming to do maybe literature in English, and the visa officer is saying, so how is this going to contribute to the life of an engineer after their study? And remember, when you apply for a study permit, it is a temporary permit. So you would have to convince the visa officer that after your temporary study in Canada, you want to go back to your home country. So the visa officer is looking at, so if this person studies literature in English and he is an engineer and he works as an engineer, of what importance? How is literature in English going to help this engineer when he goes back to maybe Nigeria or Ghana in his work? So that is why you want to choose a course that you can logically prove to anyone that this will add to maybe your career goals. Again, you don't have to study what you have studied before. I mean, if you have a big plan to change your career, then you're going to put all of that in your purpose of study, right? And your statement of study when you're applying for your visa. So you let the officer know that although I studied engineering in my first degree, but I am sort of changing career, and I feel this doing an MBA is going to impact my career change positively. So you need to put in some thoughts into the course you want to study and the institution again. So the next step is step 3. Take the language proficiency test. So most universities would tell you to take a language test if you want to apply for admission into those schools. But many, I can say up to 95% of the schools will give you the option of saying if you are from an English-speaking country or if you've had most of your education in English, then they would be happy to waive this requirement for you. Remember, Canada, it's a bilingual state, so we speak both English and French here in Canada. So you would be required to demonstrate proficiency either in English or in French to come to study in Canada. So demonstrating proficiency in either of those two languages would be either you are from a country that speaks those languages or you take the test. Now, step 4, you apply to universities. So you have to sit down, contact these universities, put in application for whatever course you want to study. Of course, you would look at their most courses would have like application deadline, right? So you want to meet your application deadline. You look at all the documents that the school requires for you to submit before you can apply, and then you can then put in your application to the university. Once you apply to the university, depending on how long it takes, the university gets back to you with a decision to say either, okay, we are giving you a space to study in our university, and then you would have either a conditional offer or an unconditional offer to study in the university. With that offer, you can then apply for your study permit. Now, this is like a big line item because whether you get whether you get admitted into a school or not, it doesn't really guarantee you if you're coming into Canada. Now, you need to put in a study permit application. A visa officer has to review your application and has to convince themselves that one, your purpose or your intent of coming to Canada is for a temporary purpose, which is to study. So they'll look at your statement of purpose, your document, your letter of explanation, all what you're submitting. And if they're convinced that, okay, this is a good application, they would then approve your study permit. That is when you can then begin to make preparation to travel down to Canada. I will strongly advise that you don't make any preparation to travel to Canada until you have your study permit approved. Many times, I'm going to spend 1 minute here to explain some things. Many times I've had clients come back to me, oh no, my study permit was denied. I have enough money in my account. I've done everything. I've ticked all my boxes, dotted my I's, crossed my T's. But the visa officer came back to say, due to strong ties to your home country, they're not convinced you'll return back to your country. Due to limited strong ties, or due to weak ties to your home country, they're not convinced you return back to your country, or due to your current situation, due to your work situation, due to several reasons, they're not convinced you'll go back to your country after your study. So it is your responsibility to convince the visa officer that you would return back to your home country when you finish studying. Again, I'm not trying to blow our trumpets here, but I think this is really the important thing. The important reason why sometimes it is good for you to approach an immigration consultant that understands these requirements, and they're able to guide you and tell you what to say in your letter to the visa officer. If you engage an immigration consultant, they will prepare what we call a submission letter. The submission letter will detail your present situation and try to convince the visa officer that this person has demonstrated that they would leave Canada, and then very likely the visa officer would approve your application. Another good thing with using an immigration consultant is really the fact that a professional, will help review your strategy. So not just your application, your strategy. When clients come to me, I tell them, before we even put pen to paper, let's hear your strategy. What is your plan? What do you want to do? And then say some things on there. If you say this, I'm not sure you'll get a study permit. And then we try to align your strategy from the very beginning, and then all the documentation and every other thing would follow accordingly. Okay, so let's assume you were very, very fortunate to get your study permit approved, and then it's time to travel. So you need to plan your travel. Obviously, you would have to book your flight tickets, if you want temporary accommodation, where are you going to stay when you're studying, blah, 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 blah. You know, the list is endless, but you want to make all those preparations. If you have friends, family in Canada that would help you do all of that, you need to start engaging them. Make sure you have everything ready before you travel. The next thing is you're now here in Canada, study time. Many of my clients actually, when they come to Canada, are like, oh my God, it's like I did not study at all. Yes, that is correct. The study here in Canada is not fun. It is engaging. So when you're coming to study, a lot of persons say, I'm coming with my 3 children, I'm going to study. And I tell them, you're coming with 3 children, all under age 5. Have you thought about the commitment that is going to require? Would you have time to take care of all 3 children? Are you coming with your spouse that can give you a helping hand? You know, those are things you need to consider. It's going to be really engaging. So you want to prepare. If you have someone that can accompany you, your spouse, you can even bring in maybe your parents or anybody that can be of help to you when you're coming to study. So again, Those are sort of the things you need to consider before you come. And when you are studying, the reality will all dawn on you that it's really engaging. Now, let's assume you're done with your studies. Life after study. Yeah, you have your certificate now. What are you going to do? We know that about 9 out of 10 people want to try to remain in Canada. And it is absolutely legal for you to remain in Canada after your study because there are legal path routes, ways for you to remain and transit into other form of permanent status here in Canada. So we're going to consider some of those status before we take your questions. So I said immigration options. So the very readily available option once you finish your study is the postgraduate work permit. Now, according to the rule here in Canada, if you study for up to 8 months, you will be eligible for postgraduate work permit. So if you study for less than 8 months, you will not be eligible for postgraduate work permit after your study. Remember, your study has to be in a designated learning institution. So we said that before, you have to check and confirm that the institution you're learning in would be is a designated learning institution. Now, if your course of study is between 8 months and less than 2 years, greater than 8 months and less than 2 years, you will get a postgraduate work permit that is equal to the length of your study. So for example, your study is 12 months. After you finish studying, you get a postgraduate work permit of 12 months. Your study is 8 months. After your study, you get a postgraduate work permit of 8 months. Okay? If your study is 19 months, you get a postgraduate work permit of 19 months. But if your study is 2 years and above, then automatically you will get a postgraduate work permit of 3 years. So if your study is 2 years, you get a postgraduate work permit of 3 years. If your study is 10 years, you will still get a postgraduate work permit of only 3 years. Now, that postgraduate work permit is very important because it is that bridge that gives you a breathing space for you to now connect and get into any of all these other programs. So I'm just going to run through them in 1 minute, and we can have another session later to go in depth to them. Federal Skilled Worker Program, Federal Skilled Trades Program, Canadian Experience Class. All of these come under the Express Entry, so you can still come into the Express Entry. Now we also have the Quebec Skilled Worker Program and Quebec Experience Class if you want to live in Quebec. Beyond that, we have provincial nominee programs, provincial and territorial nominee programs, right? So we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. All of them have provincial nominee programs. You can latch onto any of them. You can also get onto federal self-employed program, immigrant investor venture capital class. You can also get into home childcare provider pilot and home support worker pilot. You can get into Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. You can get into Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program. And last but not the least on my list here is Agri-Food Immigration Pilot Program. Remember, this list is not exhaustive. So there are many other programs, but the postgraduate work permit gives you that bridge, that breathing space for you to then eventually and effectively transit into any of these other programs. So this is where I would like to stop for today.